Hello friends and welcome. This is Katie. Thanks so much for stopping by. I am excited to be back with another project for Maker Forte, and today we're going to create a sunrise ink blended panel. Last week we did the sunset, so I thought today we would do a sunrise panel, and we're going to use a mix of color Hive inks and distress inks, and we're going to use a new silhouette stamp and stencil set. So we're going to start with some hot press watercolor paper, my go-to for ink blending. The stamp set and stamp and stencil set that we're going to use is the Dear Dad. So the stencil that comes within that stamp set is actually the mountains that you see there and that water scene. So that's a whole stencil set that you get. We're not going to use that today. We're just going to use the main stamped image that has the deer and the foliage and the trees. The Father's Day stamp that we're going to use comes from the You're Truly Fabulous stamp set, so we're going to use that today. And then the inks, we're going to use Red Luster and Sugar Plum inks. Those are color Hive inks. And then we're going to use some Fired Brick and Wild Honey Distress inks. Now, if you don't have Wild Honey, you could use English Mustard. I didn't realize that until after I had done the panel, but either one of those colors are going to work for your yellow. We're also going to use some foam blending tools. I prefer those when I want some nice deep color saturation versus my blending brushes. So starting off with our Wild Honey or English Mustard, if you don't have the Wild Honey, and I'm bringing that up about halfway onto the panel, fading it off. And then I'm going to come in with the Red Luster. Now, my Red Luster is very saturated, so I dab off onto my glass mat before bringing it onto my panel. And I'm making sure to overlap onto that Wild Honey. One of the things about ink blending is that it's important that in order to get a smooth transition between colors, so you don't have those stark lines, is making sure that you come over your bottom color, your top color, your middle color, whatever it is. You want to make sure you're bringing all your colors over top of each other. And you're going to see as I go through this panel what I'm talking about. So I brought the Red Luster over the Wild Honey, but now I'm bringing Wild Honey over the Red Luster, because I need to make sure that I have a nice transition at the very bottom, that it's not just a stark orange line from that Red Luster. Now, I will come in with the Fired Brick and do the same thing and just overlap all those colors. Now, before I bring in the Sugar Plum, it's important that I have my base of color between the yellow, orange, and the red done, because once I bring in purple, the more you blend those colors onto each other with that purple, you're going to make brown. So make sure you have all these three other colors for the most part. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you do need to make sure that you have most of the blending done, so that once you add your purple, you're using just a little bit of those other three colors to make sure everything blends smoothly together. Okay, so as you can see, I'm bouncing between the Red Luster and the Fired Brick, a little bit of the Wild Honey, because I need to make sure that I don't have those sharp lines. I like to have it nice and smooth as I can get. And sometimes, depending on your colors, you're not going to get a smooth a blend, and it's just because of the contrast between the three colors or the four colors, whatever it is, however many you're using. So now I'm coming in with Sugar Plum, and I chose Sugar Plum because I want to build the color up. If I went right with Coronation Purple, that's a really dark purple, it would be very difficult to blend that out because it's such a dark purple. So this allowed me to build up the purple and create that depth of the sunrise, you know, without that such stark contrast. So the other thing, as you can see, I'm adding in the purple, but then I'm coming back in with either Fired Brick or the Red Luster, and I'm overlapping those. And what I have to be careful, because as I get towards the end of adding these colors, I start to get brown. Still get a nice purple shade, but it's a fine line. So it's important as you're ink blending and you get closer to the end to take a step back and look at the panel and make sure that you don't use too much of the purple. And of course you could use a little bit of black if you really wanted to get a deeper edge right there at the top. I didn't. I just stuck with the purple and how it faded into brown, because to me that's more of a natural look of a sunrise, or even like a fiery sunset. Either one of these, one of those sunrise sunsets could work with this particular color combination too. So now I'm just picking up some of the colors from what I have off my glass mat and using those to blend those colors together, and that is going to finish up our ink blending. Now the panel took me about 11 minutes to do, so take your time. If you don't think it looks right, keep going, keep blending those colors. Sometimes you got to waste a little bit of paper to practice your blending in order to get the technique down that will suit you. Okay, so got my double-sided adhesive on the back of my panel, started inking up my stamp, and realized, you know what, I need to re-ink my ink pad. So pulled out the re-inker, and these are like a silicone foam sponge. And so normally when I re-ink an ink pad, I use my little glass block to kind of smear everything around. But I realized that if I got a nice even coverage, the pad soaked it right in. So once I got it all smoothed out, the excess, I went ahead and just put my re-inker right to the ink pad and squeezed a little bit evenly to glide across the ink pad, and you can see that it absorbs right in. Super smooth, very simple. So now I'm going to ink up my stamp. The other thing I wanted to talk about with the Eclipse Black, sometimes I have issues getting a nice solid black impression with my silhouette stamps. And so I'm going to ink this up twice. So this is the first time, and now I'm going to ink it up again. And it's still not great. And what I found is that this takes a little bit to dry, a little bit of time. So what I'm finding is that even though I'm inking up, and some of the ink is going on, it's also pulling a little bit of it back off. So I just heat set in between each stamping. That way the ink is dry and I can make sure to fill in those spots. Now, I'm a little bit anal retentive. I want a nice solid black image. So if it doesn't bother you to have the white specks, you don't have to go through and do all this. But I did ink this up about 5 or 6 times, heat setting in between, to dry the ink a little bit. Now you don't have to go crazy. I do leave it in my MISTI, but I'm not holding my heat gun down onto the stamping tool. I'm just wafting it like a hairdryer to get the sheen off of the ink, because that lets me know it's a little bit dry. And then once it's dry, I can go ahead and ink up my stamp again and restamp to fill in some of those gaps. So like I said, I did that like 5 or 6 times, but you don't have to go and be that serious about it if the gaps in the stamping don't bother you. If it does bother you, that's what I found works for me, especially for the Eclipse Black Color Hive ink. Plus, it gives a nice, cool, enameled look to it once you get it all dried. So using a piece of Eclipse Black cardstock, I'm going to ink up the Happy Father's Day with some embossing ink, and then use some gold embossing powder. I do ink that up twice. And this is my favorite gold embossing powder. So I'm going to use the Wow Metallic Gold Rich, and then we will heat set that till it is smooth and melted. And then once it's completely cooled, I buff it off a little bit, get some of that anti-static powder off, and then use my paper trimmer to create my little sentiment strip, creating a little banner angle there, or a little side angle. And we'll use some double-sided adhesive on the back of that. On my main panel here, I will push this up a little bit, but I needed to be able to get this all lined up. That's my cat, if you heard her. I did layer that with 2 pieces of 110-pound cardstock, so we've got a little bit of dimension there. And then I've got the Happy Father's Day sentiment that I'm using my T-square ruler because I'm not very good at lining things up. And I wanted to make sure that was nice and straight. But that finishes up the card. I hope you enjoyed the video, my friends. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Be sure and check the description box below and follow us over on the Maker Forte's Facebook group called The Crafter Party. We love to see what you guys are creating. Thanks so much for joining me today. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll catch you in the next video.